really know about immigration in this country? Do you think that they're down there at the border walls? Do you think that they have any idea of what's going on? No, but they comment on it. They comment on healthcare. They comment on social injustice issues when these guys all live in gated communities and probably have no idea really what is going on. But that doesn't stop them from commenting, and it doesn't stop the media from jerking them off every time that they say something with just so many bows and praises. And guess what, Eric? They can say it because there's no repercussions. ESPN's not going to cut their TV deal. TNT's not going to cut it. The sponsors on the jerseys, they're not going to cut it. They all like it. Nike is not going to do anything to LeBron or KD when they attack Trump and they call conservative voters stupid. There's no repercussions here. Now, all of a sudden, when it comes to China, where you actually have a country in Hong Kong that in the year 2047 may lose a lot of the freedoms that they have now, if not all of them. And they're protesting to the point where this summer they shut down Hong Kong airport. And you have a guy like Steve Kerr go, well, I really don't know that much about this to be able to comment. Really? This story didn't just pop up with Hong Kong last week. This has been an ongoing issue. And now you have a right to step up and talk about the way people are treated. You could talk about democracy. You could talk about humanitarianism. You could talk about all these different things. And now cat's got your tongue. Why? Because China's got your wallet for $4.5 billion. And you guys don't want to deal with the salary cap ramifications. You don't want to lose your TV deal. And you don't want to lose your revenue stream to 1.5 billion people? So that's the hypocrisy of the NBA right now. And that's the corner that they've panned themselves in. It was great to go in and bully the city of Charlotte in the state of North Carolina. We don't like your bathroom policies. We're stripping you of the All-Star game and we're taking all that revenue, all that hospitality money with us. And shame on you for doing that. Oh, but China can do whatever it wants as a communist run country because they're taking money from you if they cut you off and they cancel you. That's my problem with it, Eric, is they've built themselves up here where they like to stand up on their soapbox. They like to point out every little thing here in this country, in the U.S. But when they have an opportunity to speak on larger issues, none of them want to talk about it because they've all got their hands in the pot. You haven't heard a peep from LeBron because he's Nike's boy. China is a huge market for Nike. He can't go over there and talk about that stuff unless he's willing to basically turn his back on Nike and $1 billion lifetime contract. And you haven't heard anything from him. Same with Popovich. Same with Steve Kerr. Popovich comes out, doesn't even talk about it, just starts attacking the U.S. stuff again versus what the question even was. So that's my problem with it, Eric. I don't expect these guys to dive into that. But if you're going to be so hardcore, and there's not a lot of them, but there's a group of them, and everybody knows who they are here in the States that have a comment about something. All of a sudden, every NBA coach is a expert in healthcare, which is amazing that they're breaking down film, but somehow know the ins and outs of a 10,000 page healthcare bill. Amazing. But they don't know anything even to make a comment on one of the biggest stories that's happened over the last 9 months. It's just hypocrisy at its finest. And what we talk about all the time, when money is involved, money talks. Same thing we talked about a couple weeks ago with the Rock Nation deal. Nobody wanted to play the Super Bowl, right? But all of a sudden, there's money to be had, and now we've got a relationship that pops up. Same thing with the NBA. Eric, the NBA right now looks way worse than anything the NFL has ever done.
Those are all excellent points. I think for me and where I stand politically, you're hitting the nail on the head. I agree. With the left leaners in this country, you get a lot of emotional responses. You get a lot of guys willing to step out and talk about things that they really don't know about, because as long as you're emotional about something, then people think you're an expert on it. Well, guess what? Once you go geopolitically, once you go international, all of a sudden you don't know as much as you thought you did. Well, a guy that doesn't know what situation he's getting himself into, potentially for the rest of the playoffs, is Joey Logano. When we get back from this short break, we've got to go to overtime and discuss what happened at Dover with the NASCAR playoffs last week.
All right, we're in the home stretch. Time to jump into overtime, talk a little NASCAR playoffs. Big win for Kyle Larson at Dover on Sunday, Eric. His first win in what seemed to be years of action. The guy just had the worst luck to begin the season, but he put it all together on Sunday, and he got a little bit of help in stage 2 when he was chasing down Denny Hamlin, and Denny Hamlin found himself behind Joey Logano, who I think he thought was going to be a pretty easy pass considering Logano was more than 20 laps down at that moment. But Logano raced Hamlin hard, killed his momentum. Larson caught up, eventually got the lead and held on to win his first race of the season. After the race, Denny Hamlin not very happy with Joey Logano, actually referred to him as an idiot at one point, saying that there was no reason to race that hard. Logano countered saying, hey, we're trying to get every point we can. We're in a battle to beat out 4 other guys and make it to the round of 8. So did you have any issues with Logano racing as hard as he did at that point in the race?
Actually, I did have an issue with the way that Joey Logano raced, not because he can't do that, but look, we've dealt with this situation in the past, and commonly it's with Joey Logano involved in some way, shape, or form. These two have a history with one another, first of all, and I think that's always in the back of these drivers' minds. There's been Hamlin and Logano and different wrecks that they've had together. So, if he has a chance to hold him up, he's going to hold him up. But what is the long game here? You and I debated that pretty heavily a couple years back with Logano and Kenseth. What's the long game here? The long game for Logano was not very smart because I think he should have got out of the way. You're 20 laps down. You're second stage racing. This isn't the end of the race, and you're not even racing for position. At that point, I think Denny has a bone to pick with him that, hey, get out of the groove. Let me go around. You're not even a factor in this race. You're trying to pick up 1 or 2 or 3 points basically by not finishing 35th or 34th, just trying to stay as long as you can in the hopes that other people crash out and you gain 1 position ahead of them. I think Hamlin has a point here, but these guys, it just seems to be the pattern that whether it was Ryan Newman racing, Matt DiBenedetto really hard for no reason at all and costing him a win at Bristol, or Joey Logano costing Matt Kenseth a few years back. And you saw how that ended up. But I think I know where you're going to go with this because I just don't think the long game is very smart for this.
Clearly, Joey Logano is not a guy that learns from history. The playoffs are as much as about just surviving the first 9 races and trying to get to Homestead as anything. And the last thing that you want to do is make enemies. Logano already knew his fate for Dover, that he was going to finish in the 30s. He was 20-some laps down in that race. It would have taken a massive amount of attrition or one big wreck to even allow him a chance to bust into the top 20 in that race. So he needed a miracle just to have a mediocre day. All he did was make an enemy that you don't want to make, because as much as, yes, maybe 1 point counts, 1 position counts if he can stay on that lap, something like that, you never know what's going to happen at Talladega. That's a track that Logano's usually very good at. But what happens all of a sudden if Denny is behind him and just purposely leaves him and tries to hang him out just for the fact just to be a jerk about it, to pay him back? Or if he goes to Kansas and he's in desperate need of a spot and Hamlin holds him up and screws him up and costs him a win or something like that. I think just the last thing you want to do if you're a playoff driver is to just purposely make enemies. It's one thing if he is actually on the lead lap. He's racing to stay on that lead lap, especially with the lack of cars on the lead lap in that Dover race, because that was pretty much a snooze fest outside of 3 guys following each other around all day.
Right.
Then you can make, okay, I understand to race that hard. But at that point, there is no point to race that hard. All you're doing is making enemies. You've got 3 guys up there in Hamlin, Larson, Truex. They're all playoff cars. You had a chance to piss them all off. And luckily you only made Hamlin mad, it seemed like. But it's one more guy now that you've got to deal with. Just like the talk with Alex Bowman. Is this guy allowing these non-playoff drivers to get in his head? Are they going to be a distraction to him? Racing Austin Dillon and getting spun out at Richmond and almost cost himself there. And then he wrecks Bubba at the Roval. All you're doing is making enemies for guys you're going to have to be passing and lapping. And we see how big momentum is. All it takes is one bad corner and you can lose multiple spots with the way this package is. So I just thought it was dumb. Look, as much as I like these guys to race each other hard, I just feel like you got to be smarter as a driver. And the goal through the 9 races is just play nice. Don't make any enemies unless that's what you have to do to advance. This didn't advance Joey Logano. It just made a bad situation worse, in my opinion.
A lot can be said about this in the weeks to come, depending on, how this ends up. The realistic possibility is that he has this backfire on him. And if he doesn't advance to one of the rounds, his team and his crew and his guys, including Roger Penske, the owner, is going to look back and go, well, how was that time where you were 20 laps down holding Hamlin up? How did that pay off for you? So,
and we just saw Logano at Darlington. Remember when he was chasing Chase Elliott down?
Oh, yeah.
And he got held up a few laps and he come on and called him a young and dropped an F word on him. That was racing for a position in the race, and he's that upset. So if the roles were reversed and he's trying to pass Hamlin and he did that, just think of how pissed off Logano would have been. I think when he thinks back, he's probably going to feel like, man, I probably screwed that up. But I don't know, Eric, what happens when these guys put their head in the helmet. It's like sometimes they put their head somewhere else, I feel like.
There's definitely a handful of guys, and I would put Logano in that category, that when they're out on the track, they just don't seem to think ahead. We've talked about the fact that Logano has done this several years in a row where he has just had a run-in with somebody that backfires. Kenseth took him out, just flat took him out in retaliation for what he did at Kansas. I believe it was Kansas, and then retaliated at Martinsville. There's no telling how this is going to play out. Now, I don't think Hamlin will take him out at a place like Talladega, but your point is very good that, if he just cuts him off out of the draft, you could lose 10, 14, 15 spots in one lap, doing that. And if it's on the last lap, you could end up costing him 15 points, which may be the difference to him advancing to the third round or not. There's a lot of ways that these racers can get back at each other. It doesn't have to always be putting the fender in him and putting him in the fence. There's definitely a lot of ways now with this package that you can get back at someone. And yeah, we'll know in 3 or 4 weeks if that comes back to bite him. And Logano just seems to be one of those guys in the playoffs that he's in the playoffs, it seems like, every year with a good car, but yet then he's involved in some of these blocking controversies and just kind of racing guys hard when he already had a win. He was already locked in, didn't need to be doing that. And your point about survival is a good one. Just survive. Just get yourself to Homestead. I mean, look at Larson, how happy he was that now going into Talladega, he doesn't have to worry about it. He has survived. It doesn't even matter if he's wreckers or checkers this coming week, because he's already in. And I think that's just where you want to be. Even if you haven't won a race, you want to lock yourself into where, okay, no one's mad at me. I can go around, make my laps, get my 40 points, and move on to the next week. And I don't know that Logano has that safety net right now. Well, that's going to do it for episode 307. Definitely another fun week. Sorry about the delay in episode 307. With the new job, I'll be traveling a little bit more, and the schedule could be a little bit more erratic, but at the same time, we do have plans to redo our bumpers, redo our music, redo our opening. And so this whole notion of the show coming out every Thursday at 10 a.m., well, that's just not realistic all the time now, because we don't necessarily record Wednesday night or Tuesday night in order for me to be able to produce it and have it scheduled for the 10 a.m. release time. So we'll try to cover all of the big stories from NFL, NBA, NASCAR, and then the upcoming PGA Tour season for you and get that show out weekly. We just don't know exactly which day it's going to fit our busy work schedules and family life schedules. We'll do what we can, but we're just two guys behind the mics enjoying the world of sports. We hope you have a good weekend. We'll talk back at you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Talk Back. Staying current on sports is our #1 goal, so we drop a new episode each Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or the podcatcher of your choice. For more info about the show, to meet the hosts, or to partner with us on future episodes, please visit TalkbackFanTalk.com. We really enjoy hearing your take on the world of sports, even when you disagree. After all, this show is dedicated to you, the fans. So get direct access to us on Twitter using @TalkbackJustin and @TalkbackEric. Check out our corporate feed on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @TalkbackFanTalk. We hope you have a great week. We'll talk back at you next time.